Just a reminder, if anyone needs to access translation, you can do so on the system. Good morning and welcome to the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee Overview and Scrutiny Subcommittee, 2nd July. Just to remind you, the meeting is being recorded. Please ensure that all phones are switched off for the duration of the meeting. If you'd like to ask a question, that's great, but just place your hand, please, and then the system will even number you to say who's put the hand up first, which is great, isn't it? And we'll go through that way. And I've said about translation, you'll be relieved to know I have no further announcements, so we can move on to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? If so, please raise your hand now. Magic. Okay, so that's a no, Alison there. So item 3, minutes from the previous meeting. To approve the minutes, so you've had them in your pack. Has anyone got any comments on the minutes before I ask them to be approved? I can't see any hand. I'm just going to give it a little gap in between when I say something, because my Wi-Fi has been awful with the weather recently, so I'm just in case there's a delay. But I can see there's no hands raised, so I'm going to move on. Is anyone? Well, sorry, everyone happy to approve the minutes? Can't move on just yet. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Alderman. Thank you, Councillor Howlett. Perfect. So we're all going to approve those. Emlyn, are you approving as well, or have you got a question on the minutes?
Approving, thank you.
Approving, thank you, Emlyn. Okay, good. We're all good. Alison, we're going to move on into agenda item 4 then. So we've got the South West Wales Regional Transport Plan here, and just a reminder for members, if there's questions specifically about appendix item 10 or 11, then it's going to be private. We'd have to move into resolve to move into a private session. But otherwise, we're going to discuss and consider the rest of the report. And I believe we're going to hand over to, is it Stuart or Mark?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks. Yeah, what I'll do, I'll just briefly just introduce in terms of, obviously, before I then hand over to Lee, the report which you've seen before in draft form, we bring this forward. We've been through a further consultation process and further developed the delivery plan, which I'll touch on after Lee's covered some of the policy elements. So we bring this forward for approval as part of the process has been through the subcommittee and onwards to the CJC itself for approval. And in addition to that, there's some funding being provided from Welsh Government for some posts to manage the transport elements, the delivery of the regional CJC elements, the delivery of the regional transport delivery plan. So the report touches on that in terms of the requirement to sort of have resources to manage it. And then the final element is it mentions the grants modernisation process, which is underway by the Welsh Government at the moment, out to consultation. And the sort of outcome of that will be coming through in the autumn. So we'll be working with Welsh Government and feeding back on that as individual authorities and CJCs. So that's the main parts of the report. But what I'll do, if it's okay with you, Chair, I'll bring Lee in to cover the sort of I guess where we've got to in the policy document itself, the main RTP, and what's I guess has changed since you saw the last draft, really. So just a potted picture of the journey, and then Lee will hand back, and I'll touch on the regional transport delivery plan from there, if that's okay. I'm going to do that.
Yeah, that sounds great, Stuart. Thank you. We'll do that. Okay. Thank you, Lee.
Chair.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. As I say, the committee has considered this report in February this year before it went to public consultation. Pleased to say the public consultation went well. We had well over 900 responses to the public consultation, in addition to the more technical stakeholder engagement that we've done. So we believe that the consultation has been wide-ranging. It's covered a variety of views, as you would expect. Some people very specifically commenting on the policy, some people commenting on the schemes and so on. But we do believe that is a broad brush and a suitably wide-ranging round of consultation activity. And I say we've met with technical stakeholders as well as we've developed the RTP. The other important piece of engagement, just to refer to, Chair, before we delve into the depths of the document, is obviously we've had ongoing engagement with the Welsh Government, as Stuart has alluded to, particularly around funding issues, the delivery plan, and what the regional approach may be and how that regional approach will work going forwards. Also, Transport for Wales have been heavily involved, as you would expect. They control the rail lines, certainly the rail services, and obviously we're aware of some of the challenges that they've got around the UK government and the funding issues that are alive and being well canvassed at the moment. I think also we've been engaging with the Trunk Road Agency as well, as you perhaps would expect there in relation to the M4 and the trunk roads in the region. So lots of wide-ranging engagement. I think where we get to, Chair, as I say, it is quite a meaty document. I think it's fair to say this. We've got approximately 100 pages of RTP itself, the actual policy side document. So the evidence base, the rationale for doing what we're intending to do, the policies themselves, and then summaries of the various other elements that have come together. So summaries of the consultation, summary of the statutory responses, the monitoring evaluation plan, and of course, as Stuart has alluded to, the delivery plan as well. So there's a number of appendices. So it is quite a weighty tome. Unfortunately, a lot of that is required because of the statutory obligations that we've got around the environmental assessment, the well-being assessment of the plan, etc. So the bulk of the document is a necessity, I'm afraid. So apologies if it's rather heavy reading to members, but that is what we needed to do to make the plan legally compliant. And we've obviously been in touch with Craig Griffiths about that as we've progressed. Just in terms of a quick run through then of the actual final plan, as I say, it has been subject to that long-ranging engagement there. There are a number of appendices that are listed in the report. Obviously, some of those are quite dense, as I say, but necessary for the process here. I would just draw out there that there's a glossary to aid the public interpreting the document. There's a lot of acronyms and initials and so on buried within it. So we thought a glossary would be particularly important here. There's obviously detail of the scheme assessment process, which Stuart will come back to when we talk about the delivery plan and how we've approached that to get to a recommended preferred list of schemes to be delivered in effect. There's the statutory assessments. And then importantly, we've got monitoring and evaluation as well. Obviously, no point in us doing all this if we're not going to assess how we're progressing. And I'm sure that the committee would want to look at that in the fullness of time. So there is a detailed structure there, how we propose to actually monitor what the outcomes that we secure are. In terms of the detail of this, I think it's fair to say that a lot will turn on the funding issues that Stuart will touch on later on as we go through there. Importantly, just in terms of the schemes, and I'll cover this before Stuart comes back, we've identified 4 really major large schemes across the region that have got more than regional significance in our view. There is an ongoing debate with the Welsh Government about how the funding and the delivery of those is going to be treated, and they're listed on page 4 of the report, page 12, I believe it is, of the agenda pack. Is it page 12? Sorry, apologies for this, Chair. It's
19.
Page
19 in the report
yeah,
pack.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the report rather than the agenda pack. So it's page 5 of the report. And yeah, thank you. So yeah, just in terms of the timescales for moving forward, Stuart has already touched on that. The aim is to go to the CJC next week. The intention is then that there will be a rapid tidying up of the documents based on comments, observations from yourselves and the final CJC meeting. The intention is to submit to the Welsh Government towards the end of July, probably on the 24th is our target date. I've touched on consultation already, Chair, so won't redo that. The wellbeing assessment is important. Now, this also covers the CJC's integrated impact requirements. We are obliged to do this by law. Obviously, as you'd appreciate, we've got no option to do this, but importantly, also covers strategic environmental assessment and the habitats regulation assessment. Once again, we got advice from Craig Griffiths that given the scale and the breadth of the plan, we needed to carry out those additional statutory assessments and the consultations as well. And clearly those have been completed in our view satisfactorily. We've been engaged with the relevant statutory bodies as well to confirm that's the case, and they're content with the assessments. Funding implications, Stuart will come back to that, I guess, shortly. Stuart has also alluded to the resource issues, where clearly there's a number of posts being funded by the Welsh Government. That is underway, and that will fall through the CJC mechanism to Wendy Walters in Carmarthenshire as the lead chief exec to take forward. Delivering the regional transport plan, as Stuart has said there, we've got our policy aims and objectives, but actually the key to delivering those policy aims is actually the schemes that are in the delivery plan, and Stuart will indicate how that has been progressed as well. Just in terms of the funding, there's a pot of funds have been brought together into a single pot, and obviously it's now for the CJC to distribute that pot accordingly from 1st of April next year onwards. I think just in terms of the detail of the actual RTP, Chair, if I may, we've retained, following the Welsh Transport Strategy, broad objectives, broad priorities. We've then moved into 6 specific objectives for the region, and they're driven, as you saw before, around reinvigorating the economy, the tourism issues, the environmental issues in the region, and also noting that there's a strong link across to the emerging strategic development plan. When that gets underway, the regional transport plan will form one of the key pieces of evidence to that process as the regional spatial plan develops. So that's where we are, Chair. There is really some evolution, I think, in the policies rather than fundamental change. I think it's fair to say we are still working around that idea of the Welsh Transport Strategy or ideals of reducing the need to travel, first of all, by better planning, better integration, more effective local transport, obviously getting people to the shops and to education and so on. If you've then got to travel, obviously a lot of people, given the rural nature of much of the area, we've then got policies to say about individual modes of travel. So we look at policies for bus, for cycling and walking and wheeling, obviously we've got a rail policy as well, and also a policy about roads, which I think will be essential. I think we're quite cognizant that the car will still form an important element of the travel mix in the region, given the rural nature of a lot of the area. So that's there. And then the final strand to that is promoting the RTP, promoting the ability to travel sustainably and so on. The report, the RTP itself, Chair, also recognises where we are currently with bus franchising. We know that's still a moving target, but it's coming our way sometime during the RTP period, assuming the legislation moves through the Senate satisfactorily. So I think that we've obviously only recorded the latest position there, but noting that there's going to be more work to be done on the bus network and bus franchising in particular. Just to finally then, Chair, sorry I'm rambling on a little bit, but there is a lot to cover this morning. Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, we've considered that, and there is an impact statement within the appendices to look at that as well. And then obviously we've gone, Chair, through the usual committee report process of looking at legal impacts, risk management. The biggest risk, I think, Chair, at this stage is that we fail to submit in a timely manner to the Welsh Government. They've obviously got a process to go through to then agree the RTP and release the funding back to the region. So that's the critical path at the moment. Obviously, we've had public, in terms of consultation, the report is what it is. It's obviously been subject to a lot of development work, as you can appreciate. And I think, Chair, just at this point, before I finish, I think it's just, I think I'd just like to acknowledge the fact that this is a team sport and the amount of time and effort the officers have put in as a group to actually get to this point. I think that's particularly important to note, Chair. It has been a labour of love, I think it's fair to say, in terms of moving this forward. So I think that's what it is, Chair. And Stuart, I'm sure, will now come back in to talk about the probably the most important and the most moving element at the moment, which is the delivery plan.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Sorry, Stuart, just before I bring you back in, Councillor John's got his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I put my hand up because both Stuart and Lee had mentioned funding. If they're going to go on about funding further, then I'm quite happy to wait until they finish that in the presentations. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
That's fine.
Stuart?
Yeah, I'll touch on, obviously, without certainty, but I'll certainly give more of a position of where we are with the delivery plan. So, right. Thank you,
Okay,
Chair.
Let you finish then, Stuart. Carry on.
Yeah. And some of this would have been covered before, but the process we've been through in terms of the delivery plan itself has been a kind of significant amount of work done in terms of the prioritisation. We started off with a kind of, I guess, a very long list, which included some of the ideas and suggestions which came through from consultation exercises and various other channels, as well as all the priorities identified by the authorities and assessment of the previous delivery plans in terms of from the former regional plan. That was then we went through a sort of an initial screening process to thin down and take the ones which were either outside the remit in terms of not schemes which could be delivered by ourselves from either trunk road rail, or ones which were wholly sort of inappropriate, really didn't fit with the plan at all. Went through a sort of consultation, part of the consultation process. And also we developed a matrix, which I think we presented previously, that we'd got to a sort of matrix scoring process, which looked at a number of different factors from how the transport interventions would fit with the regional transport plan, the key priorities of that, and came up with a kind of a scoring approach. Once we got to that basis, it was then necessary to look at what the key priorities, overlay that with what the key priorities were from the individual authorities and how it aligned with their sort of ambitions. So we then got down to a list of just a bit below 190 schemes and split them, schemes or programmes, and split them into two sort of separate channels as such. One being the top sort of list for delivery, the delivery list itself, and the second one being a sort of development list where we recognised that there was still an aspiration to have them, but they were either not right for delivery at this stage or would require more work or were tied into other developments. So that's where we got to in terms of the prioritisation. Somewhere in the region of the delivery list being somewhere in the region of sort of 90 schemes and programmes. Now we did have an indication as we worked through the process from Welsh Government. Obviously they couldn't confirm anything, but we had an indication target to work towards being in the region of 1.5 times the previous settlement figures, which gave us roughly a figure of about sort of 30 million, circa 30 million pounds. Now, as we went through, what we required from Welsh Government was to take the delivery list and then pick out what would be the higher elements of year one delivery, and that brought us down to a list which equates to about 47 million pounds roughly for that year one. But that includes a number of the major schemes which Lee touched on, the four major schemes. The overall programme, we sort of think is in terms of the delivery and development was circa sort of 500 million, that sort of figure, and that's against a kind of indicative sort of funding allocation of a little less than 200 million. So clearly there's more work to do. And even for year one, there will have to be some further prioritisation work to take that down, and that's something that we fully recognise. And I think Welsh Government are very keen that we progress with looking to that. I think it's fair to say that the plan we've got is a statement of kind of need and ambition. It captures everything that's we certainly feel we'd like to deliver, but there has to be that recognition that there are funding constraints. So I think it's getting to that kind of sweet spot and working through where we are and taking this down to a detailed sort of year one programme. So I think that's certainly something that we'll have to move to at pace. I think it will certainly become probably a little easier once we've got the outcome of the grants modernisation work, because we'll start to understand the exact levels of funding that are likely to come through to the region and what sort of requirements and mechanisms are in place for how that should be allocated. So I think we've got it to a certain point, and I think things will iterate quite quickly from here on. The discussion that we do need to have, I think, with Welsh Government, and we've certainly started on there, is about how these major schemes are funded. So the four we think will be certainly over £100 million for those four schemes, which places a huge amount of strain, I guess, on what will be potentially a kind of a 5-year programme, which will be below 200 million. So we are started sort of dialogue and things with Welsh Government about how this could be funded and how we ensure that there's an equitable approach to major schemes across Wales and the consideration of those. We obviously haven't had the benefit of a kind of a Burns Commission type report, which North Wales and South East Wales have had, which identified a number of priorities and things on there. So what we're sort of hoping to make the case for is that there are things outside the Burns Commission which will require consideration for potentially other streams of funding. I think the other element is that we, as part of this, we're all going to have to look to see whether there are other sources of funding which can come in to help deliver some of the schemes and take the burden off the Welsh Government sort of grant funding streams. So whether that's through developments or external funding sources, private sector investment. So I think that's part of how we take this forward and tie it into the strategic development plans and any regeneration aspirations. So I think that's something that's will be a big piece of work that lies ahead. I guess finally on there, Welsh Government have sort of indicated that they would have liked to have seen, I guess, a bit more thinning down of certainly the things for year one programme, and we acknowledge that, but we strongly feel that that's a piece of work that we can move at pace with and come up with something which is robust as we get a bit more information. So I think those are the main points for that. So I think I'm happy to leave it there unless there are any other colleagues from the region, or if Lee wants to cover anything else on there, then I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stuart. That's very helpful, and I appreciate your time and Lee's time this morning on going through the report. I think there are a few questions. Councillor John, you've put your hand up again, so we're going to go to you first, and then Councillor Percy, I'll come to you second.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for Stuart and Lee for the presentations. I mean, I like the rest of us, looked through the plan over the weekend and early week. It is aspirational, very high level, and is to be applauded. Some of the aims of the plan, I think it is sort of very, very positive. But there is a but, and I got a few sort of questions I'm going to raise. So perhaps if I go through them, Chair, and Stuart or Lee can just make note and come back on the points. Firstly, the four big schemes which are on page 5 of the report, page 19 of the papers. It mentions those four. I mean, looking at them, they seem to be one for each of the areas of the CJC. So I'm just wondering how they were chosen. Were they put forward by the relevant councils? The reason I ask possibly is the Newgale one, which is the one in Pembrokeshire where I cover, is obviously needed, but very controversial locally, with alternatives being proposed. And I'm just wondering, is this now firmly in this plan because Pembrokeshire County Council have put it forward into the plan, or is this something which is just a talking point because there could be alternatives if there's more sort of talk locally with people? Funding was mentioned, and of course it does say then on page 8 of the report, page 22, the full cost of developing the regional transport plan is yet to be finalised, but it's clear that further funds will be required, in particular refine the details of the delivery pathway schemes required 25-26 before the 5-year period of the regional transport plan commences. And there was mention then of drawing funding from other sources in line with the regional spatial plan as well. Well, of course, we know that is struggling for funding to get off the ground as well, because Welsh Government, although they've set up the CJC and given us tasks to accomplish, they haven't really put the right funding in for it, and it's very reliant on sort of goodwill at the moment, and the amount of time and effort officers are putting in. I'm surprised how much time they have got to put in with all this, because I know all councils are really struggling. And then moving on, I mean, one of the policies which is particular interest to me, I would say, is policy 6, which is the rural areas and transport provision, and develop non-car based transport options in rural areas. I mean, I fully agree, and I would sort of encourage that to be progressed, but it's got to be more than just something written on a plan and put down as a policy. We need to see some sort of action locally. I mean, the areas where I live in Pembrokeshire, semi-rural, there just are no footpaths, no cycleways, no multi-use paths for sort of wheeling, as it's called now, cycling, walking. It's just not there. People need cars, and if the drive is to sort of make them less desirable to have sort of individual cars, then it needs to have the alternatives in place to make it viable. And a working example, if you like, because I mean, putting my money where my mouth is, I encourage people to try and use the bus, flexi bus, that sort of thing. So I do try to do it myself, and I can catch the bus in 8:15 from the village I live in to Haverfordwest for a council meeting at 10 o'clock. But then, depending how long that meeting goes or whatever happens, I'm sort of reliant on getting a lift home or a taxi or something like that, because there isn't any sort of public transport. And we need to have these alternatives in these areas if the plan is going to be really viable in the overarching picture of it all. But I do applaud the plan. I mean, it is aspirational. I do think it's got to move forward. So just any comments on those points, really. And if I think of anything else as the debate goes on, Chair, I'll come back if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine, Councillor John. Thank you. So I think to summarise there, if we could have some feedback about the New Gale scheme in particular. I saw one of the officers put their hand up when that was raised, and then also generally about comment about the active travel side of things as opposed to car dominance. So just scanning through, because Teams has got, was it Sarah Edwards? Did you want to come in, Sarah, on that?
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, just specifically on the New Gale point, that has been put forward by the authority. Each authority was requested to put forward a list of schemes. This is a scheme which has been developed since 2018 and is supported by Welsh Government through the Roads Review, and it's been requested by Welsh Government that we continue to include it in the RTP. So that is the reason why it remains there for Pembrokeshire. It's through that joint discussion with Welsh Government on the best place for that to be included. Unfortunately, there are no other adaptation schemes available and pots of money available at this moment in time. So it's on Welsh Government's advice that remains there.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, Sarah. It's much appreciated. Stuart or Lee, have you got anything specifically about the general comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And yeah, just to confirm, really, the 4 schemes put forward, they, to a certain extent, they had slightly different things. Sarah certainly covered the New Girl scheme and things on there. Some are linked to essential connections in terms of where the infrastructure is at risk in terms of connecting authorities. Some are kind of more regeneration linked, I guess. A couple of them are regeneration linked, and a couple of them are about kind of keeping connections to communities. So the hope is that they're in there, but that there is that recognition, as I say, that they can't just be added to and take such a huge chunk of the funding that we'll struggle to deliver other things. Which again, I suppose, takes us on to, you were talking about certainly the rural transport elements. I haven't got like certainty and haven't got the answers, but certainly it came up strongly through the intention taking the regional transport plan is it takes the framework that's set from the World Transport Strategy, but really identifies what the issues are in the region. And much as in some areas in Pembrokeshire South, there's areas in Swansea certainly and Neath, Talbot where we've got, I guess, it's transport poverty as such. It's the choices are very limited. And that's something we're acutely aware of, and we wanted to put the, a very strong marker down that this is something that, for the very urban authorities, they won't suffer to the same extent because you quite often have a strong backbone of either commercial bus networks or whatever, which can keep those communities connected. But I think what it does is by having it down as a key objective, we can then start to further explore those transport options. You mentioned demand responsive and different things. It's how do we further develop that? How do we potentially work with some of those options to tie in maybe with franchising and things which lies ahead when we've got kind of potentially better control over the timetabling on the bus network. So I think there are a number of options, which need to be done. So I think having the marker down and recognise it as a priority is the start point that, something has to be done. But, the challenges, as you say, are the kind of funding availability, which we need to work with. But thank you for the comments. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Stuart. I think that's acknowledged right from the beginning this morning as well about the funding being an issue. So thank you very much for that. Councillor Percy, you've been patient. I'd like to bring you in now, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A few of my questions are following on from these points, actually. So in terms of those major schemes, that was a bit of a concern for me. I suppose there's uncertainty around those schemes now, isn't there, really? We've included them in the plan at the request of Welsh Government, but we seem reluctant to have them there. And we're seeking now a kind of new funding model for those schemes, aren't we? And I appreciate some different things have happened in North Wales, etc. I suppose I'd be concerned there, just perhaps a risk of non-delivery of some of those schemes if we do get into kind of a protracted sort of conversation over how they're funded. So I'm just for clarity, my understanding from the discussion is that we're seeking an additional pot of funding outside of the trunk road network, outside of the regional network, to deal with these particular schemes. But yeah, that's just my concern there, is risk of delivery, I suppose. Just to pick up on a couple of other points, the grant modernisation proposals that you mentioned as well, that's in the report, that's being, officers were reviewing that. I don't know when the report was written, because it was at the time of writing the report, officers were reviewing it. I'm just wondering if there was any further update on that in terms of the view of those proposals as to whether they were deemed sufficient. And then just on the proposals themselves in the programme, again, you mentioned Welsh Government would be keen for us to thin those down further. Are we concerned that they may bounce the plan back to us if they are not sufficiently thinned down? Because we're intended to submit this, aren't we, for approval to Welsh Government? So do we feel that might be a barrier? And then the last point I want to make at the moment is around bus services, and looking at the consultation responses, not at all surprised to see high priority in terms of people's responses to the regional transport plan consultation and those issues there, ones we all know about. Where services do exist, they don't start early enough or finish late enough, or they're not frequent enough, and many communities don't have services at all. And I'm in a relatively urban part of the region, but you can't get a bus from Swansea home after 6 o'clock. We don't have evening bus services anymore. So even though we've got frequent service in the day, we don't really have a workable, usable service to replace a car. So on that point, in terms of what's included in the plan at the moment, we're looking at infrastructure, and I understand why we're doing that in terms of the project list. but we've got the bus franchising consultations are open at the moment. I think it opened yesterday. Yeah. For the region, for the new proposed network, and I just wanted to sort of put the question out there now in terms of whether CJC is going to look to involve itself in that network development process, and particularly on the funding element of it. So I asked this question in my local authority in Neath, Talbot around the funding side of this. The Welsh Government are looking to pool together all of the regional funding that's going into bus at the moment from Welsh Government and from councils. But we know what some of the priorities are, and if we're going to deliver this, the region's going to need to have a coordinated approach to putting in resource. And I just feel like if we don't address that as part of this plan, we may get individual local authorities, for example, Swansea have got perhaps a better track record than Neath Talbot in subsidising their bus network. They may put extra funding in for their services, and we may not in Neath Talbot, and we may end up with a disjointed network again. So I just kind of want to put that out there. Are we looking to pick that up and coordinate that regionally? Because I really hope that's on our radar. Diolch.
Okay, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Certainly some challenging questions, I think, on there. In terms of your first one about the risk of delivery for the major schemes, the major schemes have certainly been identified as priorities in terms of, as I say, for different reasons. Two of them have got serious, it's connection to significant severance if they weren't to proceed. The pace at which they're delivered, when they're delivered, and the impact that it has if they're not delivered are certainly something we wanted sort of strongly put on the radar. Ultimately, they're going to. I think all these schemes are going to have to be delivered at some point. I guess what we need to do more is sort of work up the strength of case as to when the timing of when they're delivered, so that we don't end up with either developments being significantly impacted or communities being severed. So that's certainly something that we need to work with Welsh Government. But we feel that these are, for different reasons, are nationally significant schemes. And if you end up with a community being severed and seriously affected, then that's a nationally significant matter. It's an impact on those communities that's sort of, reputationally and for so many reasons is a significant issue. So I think that's why we want, we certainly want them on there. We would like to see a separate funding pot allocated. However, if there was more funding being allocated to them as part of the RTDP, we'd be comfortable with that too. But I guess we want to really bang the drum that these are really important schemes to be delivered in the region. So I know there are funding pressures, but they are schemes which are really important. So they've sort of and the steerers at the moment, they need to be included in the delivery plan, in the RTP and in the delivery plan associated with it. So yeah, we'll have to see where that discussion takes us, really. The grants modernisation, we've been asked to sort of comment on some early proposals and things, and we have to feedback from an officer perspective relatively soon. I think there'll be more discussions in terms of coming on there as Welsh Government shapes some of the thinking. They're grouping together a number of different pots, some in the region of 6 different pots of funding, and putting it together into one stream. And the purpose, certainly the stated aim from Welsh Government, was to try and streamline some of the processes, which could be quite bureaucratic and a lot of work involved with some of the bidding, and give more sort of decision making on how the prioritisation works across to the CJCs to decide. So the principle of it sound, but we're at the moment trying to work through some of the detail of what that could look like and what that means. So I think it's going to be an ongoing sort of discussion as that gets shaped. The concern regarding acceptance by Welsh Government is a good question. I think it's fair to say they would have liked to have seen more prioritisation happen. We feel that we've been through quite an extensive prioritisation exercise. We really have kind of identified where the key priorities are. We've sort of taken this, pared this back in terms of to a list. And I think the taking it ahead becomes easier once we've got more knowns, that we're working with more sort of knowns, which are, partly the outcome of, how the funding's allocated, what the requirements are on the funding, and then we can apply. Shaping the year one programme there'll be some things which, for example, are legacy schemes. We've got a couple of schemes happening across the region, which we can't stop mid-flow, and certainly we fully accept that. There's a Milford Haven transport interchange, which is, underway in terms of construction. We have to fund that in terms of to completion. We certainly wouldn't be taking the decision to stop the sort of delivery of something in the middle. So there'll be certain things which are taken out immediately. There'll be probably a core funding allocation things coming through, so that each of the authorities can develop the schemes and programmes for next year and the year after, and work that up. And then with what's left, I think once we have that certainty, we can develop it. So that's the discussion that we've had with Welsh Government, and I'm hopeful that we will be supported in terms of accepting this, because I think we've got, policy-wise, we've got a really strong base. We've got a lot of the transport needs across the region reflected in those policies, and we've got, the schemes that, as I say, I think the biggest challenge is the level of ambition outstrips the the potential available funding, but certainly, hopefully, we'll get to a point that we're accepted. So I'll go with the optimism that they will accept it. And then when you were talking about the bus services, I think the infrastructure investments, some of those have been identified. I guess the key benefit the infrastructure investment is it drives down the cost of running services. If you can reduce delay time, improve journey time, you're kind of driving down the costs of actually providing those services, which means that you can then release money for hopefully providing more services. There is something with the franchising where the difficulty is, it's one thing to have control of the networks, but it doesn't automatically mean that you're going to get fantastic savings and you're going to have, loads more sort of services running. I think what you're able to do is you're hopefully able to time them better around people's needs. You're able to time them in terms of better integration with rail services and making sure they can provide a kind of end-to-end transport solution. But clearly to have much expanded services, then it is going to require that greater level of investment. And that's something I think that would have to be considered from a local authority perspective, as you say, in terms of levels of funding, a CJC perspective in terms of how those networks tie together and link up with franchise services, and the other sort of transport options, and then also working with Welsh Government to understand the benefit that can bring in terms of from improved connectivity. So I think. No easy solution for that one, but it's certainly something that's come through in the consultations and certainly come through strong in the policies about that, the challenges of the current bus networks and the importance of it as a transport option. So thank you, Chair. I'm happy if anyone else wants to comment on that.
Yeah, sure. There's more. Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Fursey, were you happy with the response there? Yeah, lovely. Okay, good stuff. I think, I welcome the fact that there's this ongoing discussion about finance and funding, and it's an open dialogue, and also that actually we're getting some funding for the posts and things. I think it's progress. I know it's a live process, the whole CJC thing, but certainly seem to be moving in the right direction. Councillor Cundy, you've been very patient. You're on next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I thank you very much for the report. I think it's a great report. An awful lot of hard work has gone into it, obviously. So congratulations to the officers for all that. My concern, again, really revolves around the funding, which I think you've covered fairly well. But my other problem really, and it comes back, and I think everybody's referred to it, is bus transport is so key for us all down this way. Even in the urban areas, it isn't easy to get into town even from 2 or 3 miles away for people. So a lot of services actually stop at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where it's completely hopeless. So we talk about transport poverty, bus poverty, and we really have that in droves. What concerns me is the sort of underlying problems How they are at the moment are looking at the clinical services review, where they're looking to actually move a lot of their services around. People are having to come from perhaps Haverfordwest to Llanelli, from Llanelli go to Glangwili, and it's really, really difficult to get around. It takes you hours to get anywhere. So it is this connectivity, as someone's already mentioned, between the bus services, between the rail services, but some of that base infrastructure. And the whole point about the bus franchising, it doesn't seem it's necessarily joined up across councils and things, and that concerns me as well. So does it suddenly stop at the border, or does it go on, or what happens? So those are my sort of issues on it. But I have to say the report as such, as you say, is aspirational. The problem, of course, is going to be money. But if you could just have your thoughts on what I've just said. Thank you.
Okay, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think, yeah, the franchising one, certainly, it's a funny thing when they were talking about how to identify who goes first, because what they couldn't do, well, what they couldn't do is do the whole of Wales in one tranche. So certainly down in the southwest, we are going first on franchising, but even within there's connectivity to areas which fall outside the franchising. And I know Transport for Wales are kind of already kind of grappling with how they deal with those services that fall. So you can have a franchise route that kind of extends beyond the franchise boundary, running into other areas. I think what, certainly the control is a positive thing. There's been a lot of input from the local authority officers, which and the local authority officers are hopefully kind of well connected with the needs of the communities and with yourselves as local members to understand what the pressures and demands are on those transport sort of links. So what we're trying to do at the moment for that franchising is feed in as much as possible about where the opportunities, I guess, where to improve the networks. But the messaging is clear at the moment. There's no huge significant additional injection of cash coming in. So it's almost trying to take the monies that are there and the potential funding that are coming in through the sort of the bus users and different things, and how we allocate that better to build a better network, which hopefully will then gain more sort of users if the kind of reliability and the availability of some of those routes, as you say, even the running times. And I know that's something that the authorities in each of across the region have been sort of making representations on, where you've got really quite challenging sort of finish times or poor sort of start times for services, which then take it off the table as being a transport option. It's and a very important factor you mentioned was that connectivity to the health services, how we how to deal with that, and with across the board from education to health, and all the public services, aside from the need to get to the shops or prescriptions, different things on there. It's actually into employment. So there's certainly things that we're feeding in, but it's not going to be a quick fix to. It certainly won't be magicked in terms of at day one that everything will be wonderful and everyone will be able to get a bus everywhere. But hopefully it's something that as we get more control, we can improve things over time, working with Welsh Government and TfW on.
Thank you, Stuart. Derek, you happy with that?
Yeah, yes, thanks, Russell. That's lovely. Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, good. Yeah, Councillor Howlett, you've been very patient as well. You're up next, please, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would agree with Councillor Michael John's comments in terms of the New Gale project. Obviously, that being one of the four major projects, there's so many projects on this list. Obviously, it's not right for us to talk about the ones further down the pecking order. But the New Gale one, Michael John is exactly right in terms of the concerns about the scheme locally. I listened carefully to Sarah Edwards' comments. For transparency, just to alert members, in my other role, I work for Paul Davis, member of the Welsh Parliament for Preseli, Pembrokeshire. Paul has raised concerns with Kensgates on the floor of the Senedd, and in my role working with Paul, met with members of the Stand Up for Newgale Community Group, STUN for short, and I've been to a number of the consultation events that have been held. But the latest sort of costing I've seen for it ballpark is 40 million, which is a huge amount of money for a scheme that a lot of people don't like and many people don't think that there is need for. So I just want to alert members to that, and also to alert members to the fact that there is a separate planning application being put in by the Stand Up for Newgale Community Group to move the current shingle bank. Now, I'm not going to talk about the merits of that or not, but obviously they think it's worthy. But just to alert members to the fact that it's obviously a big amount of money, a big chunk of this region's money, and I think it goes to. I think we need to mention the fact that there is a considerable opposition locally to it, as well as no doubt some people who are very for. To alert members. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Howlett, much appreciated. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting reading the report. I mean, I would like to just reiterate that and as several members have said, it's a really comprehensive report. It's very ambitious. There are so many projects in it. You reading it and seeing those 4 of national significance at the start of the report, you might be misled into thinking that the report was all just about sustaining the car and transport, but actually it's a lot more to that, a lot more to it, as we've discussed, in terms of active travel, the bus network and improving things there. And I would also like to thank the CJC for having an opportunity to endorse this before it goes to their meeting on the 10th of July. I think, Alison, if we could thank them, that would be appreciated, because it's as a scrutiny committee, it's quite unusual to get an opportunity to review something before it's approved. So that's helpful and much appreciated from officers. In terms of the finance, I think we've discussed it in some detail this morning. Yeah, it's not all as it should be yet in terms of funding, but it's nice to see the discussions ongoing, and hopefully we'll get there. Certainly being parochial for a second, the Nantucket House development access has come up several times locally in terms of planning considerations and safety concerns to the massive development that's going on with the energy park and sustainability hub there. So certainly nice to see that as a prioritised scheme, and hopefully maybe if the Newgale road is controversial, the funding could be diverted to Nantucket House. But there we are. Maybe I declare an interest there, so I won't suggest that. I'd like to thank officers for the report. I'd like to thank you, Stuart, and you, Lee. I see, Michael, you've got your hand raised again, so I'll bring you back in. Thank you.
Sorry, it's one point which has just been touched on, but I wanted to come back on, really, and pardon the pun, but change the track, really. But policy 10 on rail travel. One, I'm again very supportive of it. 10.1, it says collaborate with rail agencies to improve the rail offer in the region. I mean, nobody can complain about that. I mean, I've mentioned previously that this sort of area, people very often jump in the car and drive as far as Port Talbot to use the train to London or North, because the train from Milford, Haverfordwest, Pembroke Dock up to Swansea is diabolical. I mean, if you can get a train these days, very often it's a bus replacement, so you could find yourself coming all the way back. On the end of your journey, you get to Swansea, then it's a bus to Carmarthen, then you might be back in a train or a different bus, even from Carmarthen down. You have to swap around. I mean, collaborate with rail agencies. That's great, but how they will claim sort of commercial interests on this, because I mean the report further on goes on to say it should be an hourly trip from Milford Haven, Haverfordwest upwards to Swansea, similarly from Pembroke Dock, and I think 2 hourly from Fishercad. Well, that's very much in line with ferry times, I know, but I mean, how can you sort of coerce, if you like, the train companies into improving the rail network in rural West Wales to a point where you can get these trains, and that you actually have trains every hour, when they may say it's not commercially viable for them. It's aspirational, again, as we've said in the report, and I'd be fully behind that policy. Just a bit of information on how you can sort of persuade them, I think, I'm after, really.
The trains are interesting, aren't they? I mean, there's certainly anecdotally, I know a lot of people who try and use them, and struggle because the delays and rail replacement services consistently. But Stuart, did you want to?
Yeah,
comment on
I'd
trains?
briefly comment. Certainly, it's been in the past. It's been a significant challenge. I think at an engagement. I think it's fair to say. I would see it very much as a positive step forward that we've got Transport for Wales having, certainly running part of, not all the services, but running part of the sort of services there. And it's very much because Transport for Wales are also kind of leading on the franchising, the bus franchising activity. It is about that kind of, I think, one Wales sort of solution that, it's sort of one ticketing, it's sort of that kind of, better connectivity.
Okay.
I'll kind of won't hide my frustration for the lack of investment in terms of rail in South West Wales, and without risking kind of becoming too emotive on the subject, but I think we desperately need that investment in terms of on there. I think the lack of investment in terms of Wales and in terms of South West Wales is something which certainly, the governments really need to kind of press on, and I know it's been raised some of the concerns that it wasn't mentioned in terms of investment in South West Wales in terms of recent rail investment, which will be the subject of some discussion, I think, on there, but. Yeah, we desperately do need to get that investment, and I think it also, working with the other operators aside from Transport for Wales to get those better services, to get sort of more connectivity. And I know the proposals which were put forward from Grand Union Trains, I think, are being, for a bit more connection down to South West Wales and routes through to London. Things have been supported. So I think we're, it is something that's in there as a priority and very much acknowledged as being a priority, and it's the continuation of much discussion, I think, on there and lobbying, I think, to get appropriate levels of funding.
Absolutely. I mean, thank you, Councillor John. Yeah, don't get me started on fair funding for Wales. So we could be here for hours. Thank you. Councillor Schiavone, I see your hands up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair.
No, sorry, I've gone, Sean. I'll go to Councillor Schiavone and I'll come back to you. I'm sorry, I missed the order.
No worries.
Carry on.
I just wanted to amplify what Councillor John said because I was in Birmingham last week and I went from Talbot Parkway because the service west of Swansea is ridiculous, sorry, and it's like a third world. Well, not as bad as the third world, but it's certainly. You get as far as Swansea, where you're coming from Birmingham or London, and it's not a bad service. But I mean, get from Swansea to West Wales is just unbelievably bad, and doesn't seem to be improving. And I hear people talking on platforms. You seem to be reasonably happy with Great Western Railways as a company, but Transport for Wales, I mean, I don't know how they get the contract, and if it comes up for renewal, I can't see how they can justify having the contract because the service they provide is not at all acceptable. But I just wanted to add that to the comments that have already been made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And sorry, Councillor Percy, I'll come back to you now. Thank you for indulging my mistake.
That's no problem, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to come in on rail as well, and just to pick up on the metro point, really, because I mean that addresses some of a lot of the concerns actually in terms of connectivity from West Wales eastwards. If that was implemented, it would significantly decrease journey times, and it's welcome that we're making reference to it in the regional transport plan, but as others have said, I mean there's no capital funding to deliver that at the moment, and to deliver the metro to its full ambition is going to require a significant amount of investment, isn't it, from central government. So I do think we need to just keep up the pressure that regionally on that, and that lobbying effort actually I think could be quite powerful, across several local authorities and from a regional point of view. And I just don't think we should underestimate the transformative impact the metro could have in terms of improving rail connections and just connections between communities. There'll be new stations, new communities connected to to rail access to employment, it's got enormous benefits, and yeah, I just thought I'd follow on by saying that. And I think maybe that we need to think about regionally how we make a plan to really push for this investment, because we've seen in Cardiff the impact investing in rail is having, has had to the region around Cardiff. They've got an incredible railway service now and getting better from their valleys, and we deserve the same thing, don't we, in South West Wales as well. So yeah, I think the point's made.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of agreement around that, Councillor Percy. Thank you very much. Stuart, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, really, just to reiterate, thank you, Councillor Percy. Yeah, to be honest, I'd welcome as much noise as possible from the region. I think on there, I think we, there's a really compelling case for investment in terms of in the South West Wales main line, and in terms of the metro, the kind of rail metro elements. Really strong kind of case for it, and really kind of, as you say, even journey times from Swansea to Cardiff, some of it's going to be kind of major investment that's required, but I don't see, just because it's major investment, that it shouldn't be really on the radar. And I think the more noise that we can collectively make as a region to try and push for that funding, the better. And I think that's to engage from MPs across Welsh Government and across the board and business sector. Really, I think it's something that we're very conscious of, as we've developed this plan, and we will kind of provide more information to help with that kind of awareness raising exercise. But yeah, certainly the more noise the better, because we really want the South West region to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. So we're asked Alison to approve or note the report and endorse it, aren't we? So
yeah, just before we go to that, Chair, can we check there's no questions on appendices 10 and 11, because they are relevant to this report, so we do have the opportunity to go into private to talk about them now if there are questions before we move to endorse the recommendation.
Sorry,
Chair.
I think we're okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's
so
great. Thanks, Chair.
All right then. So would somebody like to propose that we endorse it? Anyone happy to put their hand up? Thank you, Councillor John. Thank you, Councillor Percy. Magic. And all in agreement? Yeah. Okay, I think that. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? No. Okay. Oh, Councillor Howlett, you abstaining?
Yeah, I think I'll abstain on this. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. All right. So with that, then I think we'll move on to the next item. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Lee, for your contributions this morning.
Thank you very much.
And Sarah, sorry. Right. Next item is our item 5, pre-audit annual return. Page 1145 in the pack. Have we got anyone to talk us through this, Alton?
Yes, I believe Stephen's on the call, Chair.
Is he? Stephen, are you there?
Yeah, I am, thanks.
Okay, over to you.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So, as you know, the report starts on 1145 of the report pack. So this report is for information and details the pre-audit annual return for 24-25. It's going to joint committee on the 10th of July, and according to the terms of reference for the Governance and Audit Subcommittee, they will receive, hopefully, the audited annual return by the 31st of July for sign-off. So for this report, there are two elements. So Appendix A shows the outturn for the year, and then Appendix B shows the actual annual return, which summarizes the outturn into the required categories. So if I can draw your attention to Appendix A on page 1151. So as you're aware, 23rd of January 2024, the Joint Committee approved the 24-25 budget, which was set at 615,000 with a levy from each of the constituent authorities which was then reduced by 10%, sorry, through the utilisation reserves, leaving 556,000 to raise through the levy. The CJC also received a Welsh Government grant of 100,000 for the Regional Transport Subcommittee. So, as you see in the appendix, there was an overall underspend in the year of about 332,000 against the budget. So this was then transferred to the CJC reserves. So there were several reasons for the underspend, some minor ones, but I'll just quickly go through each of the sections. So the accountable body was actually overspent by 2.3k. This is due to the external audit work incorporating a performance audit within their scope. Support services, again, this year again, it was underspent by about 47k. We have a post for a senior accountant. This has been vacant due to level activity, and I'm covering the workload at the moment. The biggest one then was the subcommittees. None of the subcommittees spent any of their allocated budget. So you can see there was a £220,000 underspend in the year. So there's also no spend against the planning and programme management line. I can take questions now if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Percy.
I'm happy to do my question at the end.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So the regional management office, again, this was underspent by about 73k. We didn't use any of the consultancy and a specialist advisors work. Again, then there's small underspends on printing, translation, and ICT and computer budgets. So as you can see at the bottom of the Appendix A, we brought forward the balance from the previous year's surplus of 843,000. We also earned interest of 55,000 on these balances, resulting in a year-end reserve position now being 1.176 million. I'm quite happy to take questions now before I move on to the annual return, if that helps.
Councillor Percy, do you want to wait, or do you want to do it now?
I'd just make my point now. It's more of a point rather than a question. I mean, we've discussed budgets in the scrutiny committee several times before. I just want to reiterate, I suppose, the importance of the budgets being accurate, and you know, I don't particularly agree with budgeting for positions that aren't needed and then putting that money into reserves. We've kind of made this comment already, but I just think it's worth making again. I know there'll be some unforeseen and unknowns in this regional setup, but I would stress I'm very much against the idea of us budgeting for work that we know is not going to take place in the upcoming financial year. Diolch.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Percy. Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, as you say, that's something we have raised before, and I think Stephen's aware of that, so that's fine. Stephen, do you want to move on to the next part?
I think we might have another question, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Black, did you want to come in now?
Yeah, I just wanted to support that. It does seem to me we now have reserves of more than twice the income which we receive from the local authorities, and you know that's all very well, but those local authorities need that money as well. I'm just wondering how we can continue to levy money from local councils when we're holding reserves at that magnitude. I think that point should be made to the CJC.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Yeah, we've made that point before with the CJC, and are you proposing that we make it again?
I think we should keep making it, especially
at the moment we're making it every time we meet, and they're aware of the situation. I mean,
well, maybe they need to listen to us, and we need to keep repeating till they start listening.
Right. So it's been proposed that we make the point again about funding. Is there a seconder? Councillor Howlett. Okay. Right then. So are we all in agreement that we want to make a point and raise a letter again? I mean, I'm happy to do that, but it does feel a little bit like we're doing the same, covering the same ground over again. And although I don't disagree with what members are saying, it's just we've discussed the importance and the ongoing situation of funding and discussions with Welsh Government on funding for the CJC. It just seems that we might be We're repeating ourselves. There we are. Okay, so we're going to carry. I'm going to ask for members to vote on this to see if we're going to do that. So it's been proposed and seconded. So anyone in favour that we send a letter to the CJC? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, anyone against?
I just saw 6 in favour, Chair.
6, you saw 6. Sorry, you
Yeah.
better do the counting, Alison. You're in
Yeah.
charge of counting then. I can't count. My Aquafit groups know that I can't count. There we go. Okay, so 6 in favour, and any against? I'm going to abstain because I'd like the committee to make the decision.
No, Chair. 6 in favour. That's passed, Chair.
Okay, we'll do that then. We'll be in touch with them, and we'll update members on the response. Stephen, I think you can carry on with the annual return now.
Thanks. So the actual annual return, as I said, is on Appendix B, and that's page 1153. So, as you know, for joint committees with income and expenditure below 2.5 million, so the requirement is that we prepare the annual return. Sorry, prepare it in a form of an annual return rather than a statement of account. So, just for information, our expenditure is circa 380,000, and income, including all grants and interest, 710,000. So at the moment, we're way below the limit of preparing full statement of accounts. So the annual return is split into 4 sections: the accounting statement, annual governance statement, then we've got the committee approval, and then the internal audit report. So I'll just start with the accounting statement. So this part then summarizes or categorizes the income and expenditure of the CJC, including brought forward balance from previous years, 843,000. So as I said, total expenditure was 378,000. Levies raised, as you mentioned, against the local authorities, 556,000, and then we had the grant of 100k and the interest of 55. And then if you move on to the next section, the statements of balances, there's a 0.8 debtors. These are quite technical, so there's nothing special to them, but I just quickly give them a quick description. So in debtors, we have debtors of 84,500. So this relates to the Welsh Government RTP grant. So the grant is 100,000 for the year. We received actually physically during the year 15,500, which meant that Welsh Government owed us 84,500. So that's classed as a debtor. So that's why it's in it. We have actually now received that money, but that came in 25-26. Point 10 creditors, that shows 117,000. Again, this relates to the RTP grant, but the payment of the £100,000 grant from the CJC to Swansea Council. Swansea Council are the lead for the subcommittee, and they've incurred all the expenditure. So we will now pay over the £100,000 grant to Swansea Council, and we couldn't do that until we received all the income from Welsh Government. But I can confirm we have now made that payment. The rest of the creditors, they relate to invoices and include the audit fees, things like that. And then point 11 is the balance carried forward, and you can see it's 1.176 million. So that's the financial part of the statement. And then we move on to the annual governance statement. So this provides the CJC's response to the governance of the committee, and it's similar to the previous year's response. In here, we acknowledge that we have effective financial management and systems of control and fraud prevention. It's a standard form, but we have to do this every year. And then finally, there's the internal audit report. The actual annual return is with internal audit, and that's provided by Pembrokeshire County Council through an SLA, and they are currently auditing it today. So hopefully they will complete it this week, then complete the annual return audit. So that is it in a nutshell. Thank you very much, and I'm open for any questions.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Very helpful, and appreciate. I think going through the appendices in particular is very helpful to see the figures. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for your time. Has anyone got any other questions for Stephen about this item? No. Okay, so then noting that we're going to send email Alison as agreed by members. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item, because this is just for noting, isn't it? Am I right, Alison?
Yes, it is, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Much appreciated. So, thank you, Stephen. Next item is the forward work programme for 25-26. Alison, did you want to take over here?
Yeah, so I know members last year, we worked on a meeting by meeting basis and we populated as we went forward, but in the interest of transparency to members of the public and also for officers to plan their work as well, it would probably be better if we could hold with members for agreement a small forward work programme session, just a workshop, half hour. I think it was suggested maybe just after the summer recess where we can populate a forward work programme then for the forthcoming year, Chair. We will receive it at every meeting, so if there are amendments or changes, we can make them as we go along, but at least we have something to work for the rest of the year, Chair, if that's members are in agreement.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like a good idea. So anyone happy to propose that? Agree to that? No? Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Sean. Okay, all in favour? Okay, everyone on my screen, Alison, but you've got more hands than I have. Yeah. Okay, good. So we're all good.
Thanks, Chair.
We'll do that. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Item 7 on the agenda is urgent items. I don't have any urgent items. I haven't been made aware of any. And then item 8 and 9 relevant to the regional transport plan and appendix 10 and 11, which we didn't need to discuss. So I believe we've come to the end of the meeting. I'd like to thank all members for attending this morning, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you. We'll close the meeting there.
Yeah.